Hello everyone, we will now start the webinar since it's already 10:30. We have for the moment 17 participants online, but I expect some additional ones to join us step by step. So this is now the 8th webinar of AFE INNOVNET, and we have chosen to give the floor to WHO Europe and the OECD, because these two organizations are actually conducting interesting projects which are very much in line with the work that we are carrying out through AFE INNOVNET on age-friendly environments. And in order to strengthen synergies and make sure we do the best use of available knowledge and expertise, we would like to share with you the findings of these two projects. The first one being age-friendly environments in Europe, conducted by WHO Europe and supported by the European Commission, namely DG Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion. And the second one being actually now delivered through a report called Aging in Cities, published by the OECD. Before we start the presentation, I would like to highlight that you have a possibility to interact with us through the chat box that you can see at the bottom of your screen on the hand right. So do not hesitate to write down questions even during the presentation, and we will make sure that we collect them and that we answer them after the presentation to have some kinds of discussion, if I may say, even if it's not a direct one. So first, I would like to give the floor to Manfred Huber, who is coordinator for health, aging, disability, and long-term care at Europe, the regional office Europe of WHO, based in Copenhagen. It will present us age-friendly environments in Europe, which is to some extent a work done to adapt the tools and the framework developed by WHO on age-friendly cities to the European context. So Manfred, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everybody, and a big thank you to H Platform for this opportunity to talk to you today briefly about the work we are doing, and which very much is the work we are doing with partners. I'm sure some of you know this work already, and of course we work closely with H Platform. Now, before talking about the project, I think it's always useful to go back and ask the basic question, why actually are we looking at age-friendly environments? Why has this become such a dynamic movement from cities? Now, the first quote you have probably heard many times, cities have not been built with older people in mind. And I think all of us would probably sign this. It's very clear that the communities are so vital to the quality of life of older people. And as people are getting older, even we know from research, it's even becoming more important that they feel comfortable, they feel supported, that they are supported to leave their houses and stay active. But there are a number of other reasons and drivers behind this movement of age-friendly cities and communities. And one actually, which you see, for example, very clearly in UK, is that we have clusters in cities where probably the neighborhoods are getting not only older from the population, but also maybe the housing stock might be deteriorating. So city planners have to do something. We need to act on that. Otherwise, the inequalities within cities will grow very rapidly. Now, another reason is, and that is for richer and for middle income countries in Europe, we really need to plan for cities to be sustainable in the support that they provide to older people. So we have to look at the budgets and see what is the best value for money actually, so that we also have a kind of better feeling that this is not an open-ended budget that will grow and grow to support older people. So the service side is very important. Then we have decline. Some countries or locations are demographically declining overall, whereas others are trying to attract well-off pensioners or even seniors. And that's where I think, in fact, the study from OECD on aging in cities is providing very interesting background. Now, Julia has already said this project is embedded in a number of activities. We build on work that has been done over the last 15 years in our European Healthy Cities Network. More recently, we have the global network of age-friendly cities and communities, and these are all sources which we bring now to making a big step ahead from the original guide that has been our starting point, which is the global guide. Now, so what we want to deepen is really a common understanding, to have a more comprehensive framework for healthy aging at local level. And we do this now in a context where the research has basically been exploding, but also the tools that have been developed on local and national levels have been many countries have been very active, and we want to offer with our tools also a guide to these other guides and tools, so that we have a clear message that whenever city administrations, grassroots activities start off new activities, new initiatives, they are not starting from scratch. They can immediately become part of a big movement. And in the work we are now doing with the new tools, of course, we are adding also to the original global guide. We are adding aspects of how to monitor and a lot more about the how to do, so to develop, test, and uh, uh, provide guidance for action plans. Now, a lot of that is embedded in our overall work and mandate. In fact, the supportive environment is one of the four strategic pillars of Health 2020, our overall policy framework for health and well-being in Europe. And it's also specifically for age-friendly supportive environments, one of the strategic pillars of our strategy and action plan. And right now we are already working on an interim report for next year. So we are very happy that we can go and report back to our countries how dynamic this field is and how many new initiatives we have been seeing up and running. Now, I think this slide should have come earlier because that is the original starting point that I assume many of you know. It's the global age-friendly cities. And what we are now with our work looking into more detail is actually how the 8 domains that have been originally designed and that we are keeping basically because so many people have been using them and still use them, so we don't want to confuse them with coming up with new domains. But what we are looking is much more into the interactions and into the dynamics between physical environment, social environment, and municipal services. And now this is not an age-friendly slide. I'm testing your computer screen and your vision, but this is a snapshot that shows the overall complexity. So on the left, you see what are policy prerequisites that we have studied with our cities. How can you make sure an initiative is successful and has sustained support? And of course, political commitment is high, but participatory governance is very important. And this is where our work certainly also overlaps with AFE INNOVNET, some work packages in particular, like on participatory governance. We look into how have countries used information systems. What can we learn from innovative ways of getting evidence on what is the situation of older people? What is it that is most important for them to be changed? And how can we monitor that change is actually happening? And now you see then from programs, I'm not going into the details, to short-term outcomes, and then to more the medium-term outcomes, like, for example, reducing barriers, increasing physical activities, which we know are the keystones for improving quality of life and keeping people independent. And you see how multiple inputs of actions contribute. And then we have the long-term care, the long-term outcomes of better adapted environments. So if, again, I take just one example, which is hopefully better readable, is just to think about what is it that helps people staying active while they are getting older. And you see here from a lot of the incentives, in fact, that come from quite different actions under different of the domains of age-friendly cities. So I very much look forward to the other presentations, any of your questions, and a bit more about probably how we are right now going with drafts to cities and getting comments, doing consultations to see if our drafts are useful, and then have improved drafts for publication later in the year, in the autumn. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Manfred. It was a very comprehensive presentation, probably some sort of reminder for some of the participants, and maybe new things for the others. So please keep in mind that for all participants that during the autumn you will have the possibility to see the results through reports and the work done by the Age-Friendly Environments in Europe project. And it will be presented as well during a conference on the 7th, 8th and 9th December in Brussels. But you will receive soon news about that. It's ongoing and in preparation. Probably during the week you will have information about that. So I will now pass the floor to Mrs. Saya from OECD. Setsuko Saya is actually working for the Sustainable Urban Development Policy. No, sorry, I'm just making mistake with the name of the project. Actually, that was conducted by OECD, which is called Sustainable Urban Development Policies in Aging Policy. I really invite you to read the report that has been made available on the website of OECD, and I'm sure that Mrs. Saya will present it to you, and you will have a nice picture and web link to have a look at it. It's a great report, really interesting. It offers lots of material for all of those who are trying to find their way to convince their policymakers to go for age-friendly environments. So enjoy this presentation that will give you a first flavor, and do not hesitate again to use the chat box for any question you may have. Together with Newtram here, we are looking at the screen and making sure that we can collect them to answer them after that. So just 30 seconds for the change, and Setsuko will present you the reports.
Hello, I'm Setsuko Saya from the OECD, and thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar meeting. I'm very, very happy that I can share the recent publication of the OECD to you. And thank you, Julie, for the very kind introduction. And Manfred, thanks for your great presentation. I think the OECD's report was published last month. No, actually not last month. It's April 30th. The project was launched, and maybe you will find the publication online. And it looks like that. And maybe you will find the longest version of this report is maybe 200 pages, and that's also available. But also you can just enjoy the 30 pages version just as a policy highlight. The essence of the report is here, and I think that is much easier to read. And this project was for 2 years project, and then during the process I had a lot of support from many cities and also our OECD member countries, and also I was invited to the Age-friendly European Environment meeting, and then I will also have a lot of inputs from many of your colleagues, and I really appreciate the cooperation. And after the launching of the publication in April, we are going to have series of launching in local, like Manchester. We will have the launching on 26th of June in Manchester, and also we will have launching also in Japan. And of course, the outcome of this project is also shared to the Mayors Minister Roundtable by the OECD. I think Manoir mayors are already got the invitation. And if you don't get the invitation, please do not hesitate to let me know that you haven't got it. And this project took 2 years to complete, but since my kind of the committees in the OECD is regional development policy committees, that committee has not discussed about the demographic change so far. So the first time for the regional policy development committee in the OECD to discuss about the demographic change, mainly on aging. So there are many questions where I could not answer within the 2 years. So I'm still continuing exploring some of the questions I couldn't answer to this report. So I'm really happy to have your input continuously so that I can just update my study. Just to share with you some of the key concepts of this report. And the first question the committee asked to me when I started this project was, aging is a problem in rural area. Why cities have to discuss about the aging? And I really agree with it, because if we look at the demographic structure and which area, urban area or a rural area, has more elderly population, and if we look at the share, the percentage of total population, how much percentage of total population are above 65, we understood that the rural area has more elderly share compared to urban area. So what is the distinguished part about what is the remarkable thing about aging in cities was that the number of older people increase faster in cities. So of course, cities usually have more resources than the rural area, just economically or whatever socially. But the cities have to cope with the increased number of elder population. That is the most challenging for many cities. And when I'm talking about cities, I'm talking about mainly for larger cities, because that is according to the OECD definition of cities, we call it functional urban area, which is above 500,000 population. And it usually goes beyond the individual city's boundary, but we look at the economic unity of the area. Like there's a city, but also there are many people who commute to the city. So we connect those areas as one metropolitan area. So what I'm really looking at is such a big metropolitan area. And I just highlighted 3 key concepts that this project discussed a lot. And maybe I just like to highlight the third point first. It is about the aging trend. It's something very predictable, and thanks to a lot of projection about future population change, the aging trends are really predictable compared to other crises like natural disaster or financial crisis. So people can plan ahead. and look at the future. And it is very statistically, it is the data are available. Of course, it's very hard to get this by cities data, but still there are a lot of benchmarks that you can use as your for future population change. And also that it's related to the second point, the older people in Asian societies, of course, the older people are increasing, and then at the end, the older people might share the 30% of your total population, but still, the rest of the 70% of the populations are younger people. So in Asian societies, I will recommend that policymakers should not look at only older population, but also the younger populations, how they are harmonized, how they are coordinated. So this is one of the uh, issues that we discussed a lot. And I think that Manfred, you described very nicely about the age-friendly environment in Europe. And you showed us in a chart the goal of your age-friendly environment in Europe. I think the goal is not only looking at the older population. I am sure that you look at the, of course, you look at the quality of life for aging or quality of life or dignity of aging. And of course, that element is relevant a lot to the older people. But I think a lot of issues you discuss in your project is also discussing about younger population too, as an entire demographic population. So my OECD's project also try to look at younger people who are living in aging societies. So just to give you some ideas of the how do we see the demographic change in the future, that relates to the, the third point in my previous presentation slide that shows is a predictable, and we characterized in three categories. It came from the United Nations population forecast. And it's of course it's a country basis of population change, but we can see maybe there are three types of demographic change within OECD member countries. First type is like a Portugal is already aged, and the red line shows the 60 years old and over. So like Portugal, they are already have 21 percentage of the above 60 population, that there are going to be a peak around 2050, and then the number decreases towards the end of the century. And now we are around here. Now we are in the most difficult part of that demographic change in the long term. And then we are, maybe a lot of countries are trying to struggle to manage how to manage those dynamic change. But still you will find some, by the end of this, by the end of the century, such a dramatic change is going to be more stabilized, and we call it a new equilibrium of the demographic structure. So for those countries, it's very important to look at the current challenges, but also you have to talk about the peak. And after the peak, there is a more stabilized equilibrium. So those countries like that, what do you see the aging program here, or the peak, or the equilibrium? It's a very difficult challenge for those countries. And the second example is young and aging very fast countries like Mexico or United States applies to this category. Right now they have only 8% of of their population, but towards end of the century it's going to be 39%. So if you ask the Mexicans or American cities, they usually respond, "It's not our problem. It's we are still young." But that they have to come up with almost 30% increase of the share within this very limited period. That compares to like a lot of European countries fall into the categories of young and aging very slow. It's a Netherlands case, but they have right now it's 19% is the current elderly share, and then they are going to be 35 in the end. So their kind of their increase ratio is just 16%. So aging very slow. But for those people, they are aging very fast. They have to reach 30% and manage 30% increase. And while they have to serve a lot for their younger population. For those people, it's not. It is. You have still a lot of time. You can just go slowly. So different countries, maybe that analysis correspond to some cities too. And those different countries are facing in a different phase or different stage of aging. Not all countries are in the same stage of aging. And that similar analysis correspond to the cities analysis. Unfortunately, we do not have any population forecast by individual cities, so we tried just the analysis between 2000 and 2010. So it's just a 10 years period. And if you take the right axis is the population increase ratio, and y-axis is the elder population increase ratio. And the size of the circle shows the elder share. It's like the bigger circle means that they are larger share. Larger means just for the tentative threshold was 20%, and smaller was less than 20%. And that only, so we're talking about the OECD member countries. And we had the example of 275 as the functional urban area, as I described before, metropolitan area. So a lot of cities falls onto the aged, they are already aged, and then the elderly share increasing very fast. It means that all cities, they are already aged, and then the elderly population is increasing very fast. And that area is increasing, elderly populations are increasing slow. And for younger cities, it's small circle and orange or blue, orange or green. Those green orange circles means that they are still young, but their elder population is increasing very fast. Like Calgary or Brno from Czech Republic falls into the category. But I found many cities, they are young, like green cities. They are young cities, but the elder population is growing slowly. So we described in three patterns of the aging trends which phase the cities are in. That's almost, I think, it is not a scientific similarity, but we think that maybe those blue circle, yeah, aged and aging very fast, aging fast cities, aged cities maybe follow the similar patterns like that Portugal's case, and also the young and aging fast cities like those Calgary or Brno might be following that trend in the future. And then the rest of the cities may follow like European cities like age, they are still young and takes a while to get to the aged population. So the OECD's report analyzed, depending on the three types of cities, what kind of challenges are for them the priority and what kind of consideration they have to make when making policy making. I don't know. I think I repeated almost the same explanation before, but maybe a lot of the challenge are in this type of cities, which is young city, but aging very fast, because they have to take the balance of the generation mix. The younger they have to serve for the younger generation because they still are the asset for the economic development for the cities, but also they have to serve for the increasing number of elderly population. And also some of the many European cities fall into category type 3. They are young, and then the demographic structure change is slow. But so our assumption is maybe cities, the cities are looking at. So those cities can learn practices from other cities' experiences too. So they also have to kind of the awareness about aging because they are for the cities, the elder populations are still very small, so they do not have a lot of experiences of how elder populations live and how do they work, or how do they enjoy their lives? What are the qualities of life for those elderly population, which are still smaller share in the community? So that is the kind of assumption that we made. And maybe I'm not going to talk about a lot of things about, but with the second, this is about the time frame of aging, the different phase of the elderly populations are different fates that each cities are facing in the aging population. But some of the exercise we did is another dimension is a geographical distribution of elderly population. Of course, one city is not aging in the same way. And this is the Lisbon's case. And the city of Lisbon is here. And it's expanded to here and there. And that's how they changed the elderly population share in the 2001-2011. And not all areas are aging similarly. There are very many differences in the pace of the elderly populations. And I wanted to explore further which part of the city is aging faster and whether it is a problem or not. But just according to the lack of time and lack of data availability, we were not able to do the analysis in this scale. But we were interested in this assessment is that one of the recommendations mentioned about the compact city development. Compact city development means that compact, dense development, and the area is connected by public transport so that people have easier access to services or homes or works or shopping or any healthcare services. So we thought whether the aging patterns whether the compact city development or compact urban form may contribute to the quality of life of elderly people because elderly people are concentrated in which area. We wanted to discuss it, but we are still in the middle of the assessment. And also, so there are several questions that are raised from our committee that what is the elderly definition of elderly? And just for the statistical purposes or statistical easiness, we took 65 above as the elder population because everybody used the threshold. But we discovered that not all cities are using the same definition. Some cities use definition of elderly above 50 because they concern that those 50s have to be prepared for their latter rate of the above 50s people have to be prepared for the aging or later life in their life, in the later stage in their lives. So some cities took 50s at their as their objectives. And some cities use 75 years old because they think 65 and 75, between those 10 ages, people do not have any physical difficulty of accessing to healthcare services, or they do not use that much healthcare services in the same. And then if people become above 75, the needs for the health care increases faster. So there are many thresholds, I'm sure. And this is just a chart we just did a little calculation and how it looks like the elderly population share, elder populations increase, whether we took the 50 years old as a threshold or whether we take the 75 years old at the threshold. And of course, there are many ways. I think I'm using this for the policymakers to look at which population they should look at when they're talking about elderly population, and that completely changed the map of the demographic change. Maybe just go to my final slide. It is about the fruitful thoughts. There are some questions I want to continue discussing further this year. The first question is how well policies for aged societies connected with other policy areas. I found many great cities, very innovative ideas about policies for aging societies. and they are very innovative and very dedicated to serve for the Asian societies. But sometimes I find industrial policies are not really connected to the Asian policies, or vice versa. How much employment policies or industrial policies cares about their Asian societies? It's about policy silos. Policies, usually the governments like to work in a section by section, so it's really hard to make the discussion or network among the different policy areas. But I'd like to know how far you are good at connecting policies for Asian societies with other policy areas. And the second question is about the collecting data, the measurement of the policy impact. And it is, of course, it's not only the question for the Asian societies, but how do we measure the policy impact? And I also discovered great, very innovative ideas of mayors about the Asian societies. Sometimes they forgot to measure the impact. But the question is, what do you measure? Like, do you measure the impact by GDP increase, or the number of employment of elderlies, or the mortality rate of the elderlies could measure the policy impact? I'm sure there is not one measurement indicators to measure the policy impact. And maybe a age-friendly network have 8 dimensions to measure about the policy areas, about what are the components of age-friendly cities. The measurement way to understand the policy impact. And I'm saying that because maybe for aging society, there should be some indicators that are different from the current indicators that we use to measure the quality of life. So I think we should be more innovative about the developing measurement way. And the third element about the individual cities' approaches, how much they are well connected with other municipalities. Like if we go back to the map of Lisbon, the Lisbon city exists here, but Lisbon's economic kind of network expands to the whole area. The blue area is the metropolitan area of Lisbon, they call it, and they call it as one of the governance entity to govern the big regions of the Lisbon. But also there are many people who commute to the metropolitan area of Lisbon in the blue area. So those areas as a whole comprise a network of economic unity in the area. And in that area alone, there are 270 municipalities. And like transport or healthcare services, if the individual municipalities, 278 municipalities, duplicate the same policies, it is not really efficient. So if there is any ways to look at the network of metropolitan areas, especially some areas are apparently decreasing populations because of the economic situation or because of just a natural decrease. So it is I think the Asian societies gives a nice chance to think about how the large metropolitan areas, municipalities in metropolitan areas can collaborate in the policy making and of course implementation. So thank you very much for this presentation. I'm really looking for the discussion. Thank you.
So you might have understand that we are actually in the same room. Manfred is in Copenhagen, but Mrs. Saya came to Brussels to be with us, and she will have another meeting with us this afternoon with people based here in Brussels to again present the results of this very interesting report. So Again, thank you to Manfred and Manfred Huber and Setsuko Saya for presenting this very interesting piece of work. I mean, you can see how much complementary they are to each other. For us, it's great because it actually very much supports the work we are doing through the thematic network AFE INNOVNET on age-friendly environments in the EU. You can see, I mean, what I could highlight actually as the main findings, I mean, this issue of looking at not only at the aging population, but as well at the other segment of the population is very much highlighted. And for us, this is something very important because we do know we can't only concentrate on one part of the population, probably the big mistake that was done so far. Looking at these future trends and try to make sure that what you are doing today will have as well a positive impact in the future. This all work done around statistics is really interesting as well, and indeed it could be really interesting to know better what different cities are doing in that sense. I think there is currently a great piece of work conducted by the Kobe Center of WHO, which will probably complement as well that research part. And the main, from what I know, the main findings will be presented in the autumn in Kobe. There will be a big conference as well on that part. You have seen in the chat box that Andy Bleeden from Stockport has shared as well the information around the work and the presentation to be done by OECD in Manchester, as well as the results of the SENSE project, which is an interesting one as well about the participation of all the people in policy making and different initiatives. So all these elements are really interesting. The other big piece of work, I mean, something we support very much, and we are trying to do as well here in Brussels with the European Commission about breaking the silos between the different branches, the different Directorate General here in Brussels, but it might be in the city, the different services, just to make sure that you have some sort of mainstreaming of demographic change or issue around the population. This is something that we all know is really important, but well, the implementation then is pretty an issue and much more complicated. It needs some sort of conversation between all the participants. I'm just reading the questions sent by Carlos Vargas from the University of Deusto in Biscay. He wanted to know about the selection of case studies, why these cities have been selected by OECD in the reports. Carlos, I will give again the floor in a minute to Mrs. Sayas to give her the possibility to explain you why this choice. What I wanted to highlight as well is that we will have an interesting event on the 7th, 8th, and 9th December here in Brussels. And actually, the conversation today, the presentation done by Manfred Huber and Setsuko Saya, shows how much it will be important to have this kind of discussion. And we will organize different workshops to allow cities and regions to exchange ideas and to see how they can look at these demographic change issues, how to better implement their policies, and how to develop different plans. We will make sure that the OECD will be on board because the event is anyway co-organized with WHO Europe and the European Commission, it may answer some of your questions. I don't know. I hope so. During the project of IFE INNOVNET, we have started developing as well a framework on how to measure the socioeconomic impact of action plans on age-friendly environments. So we for the moment, we do have a framework that is available on our website, which is an interesting piece of work. But this is really only a starting point, and we know how difficult it is. And they are good experience indeed. But I will first give you the floor, Mrs. Saya, to answer the question raised by Carlos Vargas, and to make sure that we better understood why we're choosing this different study.
Thank you. It's a very tough question to answer because honestly, it's a more practical process. We didn't select. We talked with cities which showed interest in this project, and maybe I'd discuss with them. Now we have 9 cities, or I would say 9 cities remained in this project. But I talked to twice as many as cities, or more than that. And then first they agreed that they were not able to continue the cooperation because I don't know, but those cities remained in this case studies were all that are interested and have higher priorities of aging issues among their all policy areas. And so it is really hard to tell whether we selected or not. They remained it. Very thank you for the cities. And of course, something that we care was that to take into account the geographical diversity, because the OECD covers not only Europe but America or Asian. Japan, Korea, United States, and Mexico are also OECD member countries. So we made sure that that covers every continent. And also something that I took in mind is to have the idea of how young cities are doing and also to compare to how older cities are doing. So when I try to contact the cities, I look at the elder population share and try to make the balance among the 9 case study cities. So it's not really the responding to your question, but still that is a kind of process thing that yes, that remained in the ended up in 9 cities.
Okay, thanks a lot, Setsuko. I wanted to ask Manfred whether he would like maybe to react to the presentation made by Mrs. Saya and how he sees maybe synergies or if he has anything to add actually to that presentation regarding the work done by WHO.
Thank you. This was indeed a very interesting presentation, and I think especially the last points are really points for thought. What we are seeing is indeed that these metropolitan areas, they have quite challenges, some challenges of policy coordination. And I think Lisbon is a good example, but also if you look at other examples like the bigger Paris conglomeration, I mean, this is really difficult to coordinate infrastructure and the urban development. And then I think it is a really very valuable reminder that when this coordination takes place, and it's probably more on industrial policy or classical transport planning, meaning we look into those people who commute for work purposes, but not necessarily for staying in social contact of older people. So I think positively, if we turn it around, maybe the age-friendly movement could be an impetus to and a valid reminder that we need to reach out. It is, of course, very valuable to do as just taking the slogan from New York City, age-friendly New York, one neighborhood at a time. So neighborhood is a very important scale, but we need to look at the bigger scale. And also when we look at these nice graphs from Lisbon and other cities, the question is really, what do we see here? Is this people migrating? Is it older people moving out of the city center? Or is it where people are getting really older that they are aging in place? Or have they more have they moved there because it had become too expensive to live somewhere else? So I think all that is really very interesting uh, food for thought and really an agenda on which we all together need to work also across international organizations to keep this on the agenda. It is as has been really shown clearly by the data that Suzuki has presented, it is becoming urgent. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manfred. And actually, just to remind to all participants that WHO has launched a new website pretty recently, which is called Age Friendly World, and where you can see lots of material actually, all the background information that was given by Manfred, but as well some study case, good practices. There is a library with toolkits as well, so do not hesitate to use that website. And if you want to share your own experience, it's a good way as well, either through the thematic network AFE INNOVNET or through this Age Friendly World website. It's pretty interesting, and it's sounds interesting as well for me, this issue of aligning the different agendas between different levels of governance, because I was in Groningen last week for a workshop. Groningen is let's say middle-sized city in the north part of Netherlands, and their agenda is very much focused on healthy aging. So it's to some extent it's very complementary to age-friendly environments. It's a university city with plenty of young people. The vast majority of the population is very young. But what is interesting is actually that the university, the city, and the province have aligned their agenda, and that the three of them are actually working on the same priorities. Healthy aging, I think energy is the second one, and I can't remember about the third one. But it shows how, even sometimes above the policymakers, above the governance level, even the university is driving the agenda, making it pretty strong actually in terms of cohesion, because then you have researchers working actually on issues that might be interesting, or sometimes they push an agenda because they have interesting findings. So this is, again, it shows that there are plenty of interesting experience going on, but we just need a way actually to collect all that knowledge, and to have then organization such as OECD and WHO able to do, big studies and working on all this information and statistics, which are pretty interesting. I don't see any additional question there. So again, I would like to thank you, Mrs. Saya and Manfred Huber, to that have joined us today. You have all the web links that are made available in the different presentation. We will put them again on the website of the project of AFE INNOVNET. So it's afeinnovnet.eu. It will be done soon. Maybe tomorrow. During the week anyway. And you will receive as well information for the events we will organize on 7th, 8th, and 9th December here in Brussels, because again, it will be very much in line with that discussion we had today. So I hope you enjoyed the webinar. Do not hesitate to contact us if you have any further questions. And thanks to all of you. Have a nice